three main sections in this presentation today. The first section is a quick overview of how the property tax system works. In the second section, we'll take a look at the economy and some real property metrics, what's going on in our market. And then in the last section, we'll look at how the economy and the market is affecting our assessed values. Before we get started, I need to mention that the examples in this section are simplified, but they're valid. The actual process is much more complicated than what I'm going to present here. So since this is a kind of a crash course in property assessment, I thought I'd start out with a pop quiz. So the question is, which of these functions are the responsibility of the assessor? And I'll let you just quickly read through those. It's actually only those two. If you answered more than those two, you're not alone. Many people think that the assessor is responsible for billing and collecting. That's actually Treasury. They also think that the assessment is responsible for maximizing tax revenue. Every year we have people come to the counter and say, "You raised my assessment because the mayor wants more money." And that's not how it works. We're required to assess at full and true value, which is generally market value. And the interesting thing is that even if we doubled all assessments in the municipality of Anchorage in any given year, the municipality wouldn't get any more tax revenue. So we'll walk through how that works in a minute. But so if the assessment doesn't determine how much revenue we receive, then what does? Well, it's the budget. And this is a quick overview of the budget process. The Assembly is very much involved in the budget process. In short, the mayor proposes the budget and the Assembly approves the budget. So once we have an approved budget, that really determines the amount of tax revenue we're going to get in that given year. But we're constrained, or you're constrained rather. You can't just budget any amount because you have that thing. So within the constraints of the tax cap, the budget determines the amount of revenue received. So then that leaves the question, well, what is the role of the assessment? Well, the assessment determines how those taxes are divided. And we all intuitively know that higher value properties pay more taxes, lower value properties pay less taxes. And in its simplest form, our assessment is made up of personal property plus the land improvements minus exemptions, and that gives us a total taxable value. So now we know
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Yes, Ray.
I'm sorry. All right. Never mind.
Okay.
I thought personal property is not real property.
Yes, and I'll talk about that more as we move
Personal
on.
property, things like mobile homes,
Yes.
Yep.
personal property.
So now we know how much taxes we need to collect. We have a way to divide those taxes, but we need some method of making sure that the taxes are distributed fairly, that we don't collect too much taxes, too little taxes, and that's the role of the mill rate. And in its simplest form, the mill rate is calculated simply by dividing total tax revenue by the total taxable value. That gives us a mill rate. Here's an example. If we need to collect $527 million in taxes, and we have a $36 billion tax base, we would have a mill rate of about 14.6 mils. Now, I'll note that a mill rate can be converted to a decimal by just moving the decimal point 3 places to the left. So once we know what the mill rate is, we can apply that mill rate to any assessed value, and we will know what our tax will be. In this case, if we had a house worth $300,000, and we applied the mill rate to that $300,000, we'd get $4,380 in taxes. I told you in the beginning that we could double all assessed values and we wouldn't collect any more taxes. Well, here's how that works. So just imagine something happened and then suddenly in 1 year our assessment doubled. We ended up with $72 billion in taxable value, up from $36 billion. Well, we still have the tax cap. So our taxes would be basically the same. You do the math, you get a new mill rate of 7.3 mils. Now, our house doubled in value just like everybody else's house. So now instead of $300,000 in value, we have it $600,000 in value. So if you apply the new mill rate to the new assessed value, you get exactly the same tax bill, $4,380. So the moral of this story is that if you're in a period when property values are rising rapidly and your assessment's going up rapidly, don't hate the assessor. Okay, so we'll move into the state economy and look at some market indicators. I like this slide because it's a good metaphor for what's going on in our economy right now. We've got this dark cloud passing over the state building here, but the wind's not howling, it's not pouring rain, and we even have a little bit of sunshine still peeking through. So that's kind of where we are. And what brought us here is dropping the price of oil. We went from oil in the $100 range to oil in the $50 or $30 range. That's created problems. We have fewer jobs, state budget deficit, less revenue sharing, and so, but it's not all bad. Even in the oil patch, it's not all bad news. Just late last year, we saw two of the largest oil lease sales that we've seen in the last decade. And I've heard, I don't know about you, but I've heard rumors that Conoco's packing up and leaving town, or BP's packing up and leaving town. Well, they just announced the discovery of 100,000 that has a potential to produce another $100,000 in or 100,000 barrels of oil. And you add that on top of Kalis just announced a discovery that could produce 200,000, and then Repsol just announced what they claim to be the largest discovery in 30 years in North America, with a potential to produce, I believe it was 150,000 barrels by 2021. So you're pushing up over 400,000 barrels potential production added to Alaska. When you consider that we have 550,000 barrels right now is all we're producing, that's a huge increase. But that's all in the future. That's not today. Today we have job losses. We lost 2.3% of our jobs in Anchorage last year. So, that's not insignificant. It showed up in a slight uptick in the unemployment rate. It wasn't a spike, but it was a slight uptick in the unemployment rate. We also saw a decline in Anchorage's bed tax revenue, and this is mostly, I think mostly attributable to the fact that we had basically a flat tourist market last year, but we had more hotels competing for the same number of night stays. They ended up cutting their rates, and that was reflected in a drop in bed tax revenue. You'll also see that reflected in our hotel valuations when we get to that point. On the other hand, we haven't seen any spike in foreclosures in our market. Alaska remains near the bottom in the percent of foreclosures, or foreclosures as a percent of mortgages. Now, this should be an apples-to-apples comparison because it's not skewed because Alaska is a small state, because we're looking at it as a percent of mortgages. In any market, the real estate market being no exception, the market functions through supply and demand. If we have too much supply for any demand level, we get a downward pressure on pricing, and vice versa. So one measure of supply is the number of listings we're seeing in any given year. And last year we saw a little bit of an increase in listings, but it's well within the recent norm, and not really particularly. It's not a spike. It's not anything that's particularly worrisome. The flip side of the equation is demand, and one measure of demand is the number of sales. And we had basically the same number of sales as we've had the previous 2 years, only slightly down from 2013. So supply is holding pretty steady. Demand has remained stable. Those are two pretty good signs, or two good signs in our market. You can combine supply and demand into sort of a single metric by looking at the absorption rate. And this is just the theoretical time that it would take to sell all the houses currently on the market, given current demand levels. And people generally use about a 6-month rule of thumb. They say if you have about a 6-month supply, then you have a balanced market. You don't have a lot of pressure upward or downward, other than maybe inflation, the rate of inflation. So if you look at houses in the $500,000 to $750,000 range, we have about a 6-month supply there. Now, if you look at houses below that range, we only have a 2 or 3 month supply of houses in that range. So that would imply that this is still a little bit of a seller's market in the houses below $500,000. Now, a market segment that has never adhered to the 6-month rule of thumb are these high-end homes. They've always had absorption rates of more than 12 months, or in the 12-month range. We maybe saw a little tick up above what I've seen the last few years right here, so you could argue that that indicates maybe a little bit of softening in that higher end home market. Excuse me. This is it's not the 80s slide. People wonder, are we heading toward the 80s all over again? No one knows the answer to that, but we know that we're not set up in the same way we were in the 80s. Anytime you have a market crash, you typically have an oversupply followed by a economic jolt, and that drives up demand, drives down prices. Well, in the 80s, we had the classic oversupply here. This is the number of homes constructed by year of construction, and you can see we were building a lot of homes back then. So then we had the economic hit, and we saw values crash. Now compare that to where we are now. How many properties we're adding to the market. So, like I said, you can't say what's going to happen, but you know what has happened, and we haven't set ourselves up for that big fall like we did in the 80s. So, new construction, no surprise that new construction was down last year. 28% down overall, 37% commercial, 21% down in residential. This is only taxable new construction. We don't include exempt property in this calculation. This chart shows how that compares with prior years, and we're a little above 2010, 2011 levels in new construction. And we labeled this 2017 because our assessments are as of January 1st, 2017. This is actually construction that occurred in 2016. So how does this all play together and affect our property assessments? Before we get into the actual valuation, I want to point out that 65% of our property tax base is made up of residential new construction. And that, for some people, it's counterintuitive. You look around town, you see all the big buildings, and you think, wow, that's where all the value is. But we just have so much more residential property than we do commercial property. It makes up the vast majority of our tax base. So this chart shows kind of the history of our assessments compared to national index. The red line is our assessments converted to an index, compared to the Case-Shiller Index, which is the green line. You can see at the onset of the Great Recession, the national market tanked. We flattened out a little bit, and then recovered, and we've seen appreciation over the last few years, and starting to flatten out again at this point. The purple line represents interest rates, average interest rates by year, and we track those. And interest rates are important because they directly affect purchasing power. If you can afford a $300,000 house at a 3.5% interest rate, you would only be able to afford a $255,000 house if the interest rates rose to 5%. So interest rates are important in looking at the market at any given time. This chart shows is basically the same thing for commercial properties, and the story is basically the same, only delayed by about a year. The Great Recession started in the residential market and then moved into the broader economy, and that's sort of reflected in this chart. So, our overall property assessment for 2017 increased 0.2%. So relatively flat. This includes new construction. And we'll look at each segment individually, starting with residential property. Residential property increased 0.4% in 2017. That also includes new construction. If you remove new construction, you only look at changes to existing properties, then single-family residence increased by 0.1%, basically flat. But that doesn't really tell the whole story in the residential assessment. What really happened in our residential assessment was that the smaller the home was, the more likely it was to see an increase in value. And the larger the home was, the more likely it was to see a decline in value. And that's reflected in, I won't get into too much detail here, but this is our market cluster chart. And I'll point out that sort of continuing that theme, the hillside saw 2.1% decline in value, obviously a number of larger homes there, and the higher end condominiums saw a decline of 3.7%. You probably are aware that Alaska is a non-disclosure state, meaning that buyers and sellers are not required to tell the municipality what they paid or what they got for their house. Because of that, we use any information we can get. So we track listings. As of the end of 2016, we were tracking 2,261 listings. I mentioned that there were about 3,000 sales in each of the last 3 years. Of the 3,000 sales, 955 were disclosed to the municipality. Of the 2016 sales, over time we get more disclosures. 2015 sales, we have now 1,609 of those, and of the 2014 sales, 1,688. So that begs the question, how did we do in our assessment, in our level of assessment? If you look at our average assessed value to average list price, we had a 93% ratio. In other words, we were 93% of the listing. If you look at the average assessed value of the sales to the average sale price, we were at 96%, meaning we're about 4% below the actual sale price. And those are actually property comparisons. This is kind of a big it may be a little bit of an apples to oranges comparison because it's the total average assessed value compared to MLS average sale price. So this is all properties that sold in the MLS compared to all properties in the municipality. And we had a 97% ratio with that. So this is probably the most important ratio, our average assessed value of sales compared to the average sale price, and that's at 96% for 2017. So taking a look at commercial property, we had a 1.1% increase, including new construction. If you remove new construction, this is how it broke down in commercial. There's still a strong demand for fourplexes. People can get conventional financing. They're not building many new fourplexes, and so demand has remained pretty strong there. I mentioned hotels. We saw that decline in bed tax revenue, and we also saw a decline in value there. There were 347 commercial sales last year. Only 93 were disclosed to the municipality. And of those 93, we had a 94% assessed value to sale price ratio. Because there are so few sales in commercial, we don't rely on the sales comparison approach in setting our values. We primarily rely on the cost approach and the income approach when valuing most types of commercial properties. We mentioned personal property earlier. Personal property consists of inventory, equipment, and supplies owned by a business and also mobile homes. And interestingly, it includes scheduled aircraft owned by domestic carriers. Personal property is the rules are finalized in October of each year, so this is a 2016 to 2015 comparison, and for that time frame, we had a 4.6% decline in assessed value. You can see how that compares to previous years here. It's interesting that this entire decline can be attributed to a decline in oil and gas personal property. we had about nearly $150 million decline in that category. We mentioned mobile homes. It's interesting, we have almost the same number of accounts for mobile homes as we do for business accounts, but they only make up about 3% of the personal property tax base. So I wanted to give you a little information about the review and the appeal period because you will probably get constituent calls wondering how to deal with their assessments. And this slide shows an overview of the assessment cycle. All property is assessed as of January 1st of each year. The assessment notices have to be mailed on or before January 15th. This year they went out on the 13th. That begins the 30-day appeal period. In mid-March, we start Board of Equalization hearings, and I should note that the Board of Equalization is an arm of the Assembly, or a body of the Assembly. The Assembly has delegated its authority to hear equalization cases to the Board of Equalization. Also of note is that we work year-round doing inspections. We have to re-inspect, and this is physically go to the property, every property in the municipality at least once every 6 years. When you add other types of inspections for various causes, that puts us at needing to do about 18,500 inspections every year. This chart shows the number of appeals, which are in blue, and the number of contacts, which are in red. This is just contacts of any sort, whether they call us on the phone, come into the counter, and then informal reviews in yellow. An informal review is a valuation issue that is resolved without having to have the property owner file a formal appeal. About 95% of all valuation issues, whether they are a formal appeal or an informal review, are handled without having to go to the Board of Equalization. And the best way to ensure that you don't have to file a formal appeal is to come in the first couple of weeks of the appeal period, or contact us in the first couple of weeks. If you call us and you say, well, I just bought my house, I'm 5% below the assessed value, we can work with you and probably resolve that. If you call and say, I just realized my square footage is wrong, we can work with you and probably resolve that without you needing to file an appeal. If you wait till the fourth week, though, we're running out of time, and we may need to request that the property owner files the appeal just to preserve their rights. A few notes about appeals. Only the owner of record can appeal the value of the property. So if a constituent buys the property, say on February 1st, they would need to get an authorization from the prior owner to file the appeal, and that it's nothing fancy, just a written authorization, and that is done quite regularly. A refundable appeal deposit is required, and that's just that was instituted just to cut down on nuisance appeals.
We did that in the 2004, I think, time frame. What was happening, Fred, when you were here? People would come in and just file the appeal. We changed that because there was so many people doing it to $100 refundable. And the number of people filing appeals dropped dramatically. Because when it didn't cost you any money, everybody and their brother would come in and appeal it. But we actually required amount of $100 to be paid. We saw in the last chart a dramatic decrease in the amount of appeals being filed. We look at this time frame, somewhere around 2004, 2005, just a drastic drop since then.
And this drop in the number of contacts, I think, is largely due to the internet. Now people can answer a lot of their questions without having to pick up the phone or come in and ask us questions. So the deposit is refunded. All the person has to do is cooperate with the appeal process and attend the hearing if there is a hearing. And as I said before, about 95% of the time there is no hearing. And then the decision on whether or not to refund the deposit is the Board of Equalization's decision. So that is the presentation.
Questions? Yes, Fred.
You'll always have to forgive my ignorance. Would you run down a list of the properties, improved properties that don't have to pay property tax?
We can produce that list, but it's a long list.
Yeah, just give me the categories.
Oh, okay. It's cemetery, hospital, charitable, education, religious. Yes.
And so, state-owned property,
Well, those 5 are if they are a nonprofit and the property is used exclusively for that purpose, then those are exempt. The state property is automatically exempt. Federal property is automatically exempt. And municipal property is automatically exempt. State property includes the airport and the railroad as well.
and are there any native corporation plans that are exempt for some reason besides being a nonprofit?
Well, the native claims lands are exempt until they are subdivided to their, I think the wording is smallest practicable unit. At that point, it triggers a recapture where the municipality can go back 30 months and recapture taxes that would have been paid, but they are exempt until that time.
So, what's the line between a hospital and another medical provider?
It would be the nonprofit component.
So, is regional a profit one?
It is profit.
Regional pays taxes, Providence doesn't.
Sorry, say again?
Regional pays taxes, Providence doesn't.
Yeah, so when you said hospitals, are there, all right, so,
Now, I'll clarify that Providence doesn't pay on the hospital. They do have some sections of their buildings that are leased out on a more
yep.
for-profit type basis, and we do assess those.
All right, that's really helpful, thank you.
A question for you. I saw in the paper 2 days ago where the state wants to put 2 hotels at the airport. Is that will they pay a bed tax, or because they're on state property they won't? Which is it, do we know?
Well, we don't know yet. It would depend on how those are structured. If they, and I would imagine that they would lease that property to a developer that would develop that. But to be honest with you, I haven't had a chance to read that article. But typically they would lease that out, and then it would be accessible as a possessory interest.
Because if they build 2 large hotels, it takes away from people wanting to use their other hotels, and if they don't pay a tax on it, it's going to be less money coming into the city.
Yeah. And,
Sorry, yes,
Just to
Brad, I'm
follow
sorry.
up on that, I actually spoke to John Parrott day before yesterday, and he told me they have 4 developers. So it is like what Brian was saying. It won't be run by the airport. They will hire a developer.
So we'll still get bed tax for it?
Yes, because it'll be a privately run.
Just want to check.
and we would also get real property tax in that case, because I should clarify that anytime state or federal land is leased to a private entity, we assess it as a possessory interest.
And yes, Fred, you have a question, sir?
Yeah, so this might be outside your purview, but government has said to hospitals, you gotta take that, anybody that shows up at the emergency room door, and their cost recovery, is far less than 100%. I understood that there was some way that government offset that by giving that provider some break on something, and I assumed it was taxes, but not true.
Not property taxes that I'm aware of.
Yeah. All right. Anybody knows anything about that?
I know,
Suzanne?
sorry.
No.
Good question.
Yeah.
If anyone wanted to respond.
Done.
Samantha?
I think you had a slide on this, but just real quick, what's the breakout percentage-wise of the amount that's residential and the amount that's commercial? In terms of what?
It was 66% residential, and I forget the exact breakout of commercial and personal property. It is in there, though. There's a pie chart in there.
Yeah, 65, 27, and 8%.
Okay.
65, 27.
65 residential.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for your presentation, sir. I appreciate that.
Very much.
Well done.
Thank you.
Moving on, the next one is, we'll be talking debt and investment management, public finance. Ross?
Ross is on the phone, and I have some materials I'm going to pass out. I'm going to, and now I'm restarting it, Mr. Chair. If you want to call this work session to order.
This work session is called to order. Let's go ahead and identify ourselves for the record. Dick Trady Assembly.
Suzanne LaFrance, Assembly.
Joe Dyson.
And I've got other assembly members that are flowing in and out. So,
Ross, are you on the phone?
I am. Thank you very much, and good morning to everybody.
morning, sir.
You have the floor.
Okay, thank you very much. I know Robert Sands. Well, does everybody have a presentation?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And then thanks, Mr. Trini. My name is Ross Roosevelt. I am the manager of the Public Finance and Investments Division, and that is a division within the Finance Department, and I work for the CFO, Robert Harris. On page 2 of my agenda, we have a short agenda. It's a high-level review of public finance. That's what we call the division, basically. And it's meant to fit in a quick time frame here with a few questions as we go along. You turn to page 3. It's a small division with 5 of us. I have a reconciliation accountant, investment accountant, a cash officer, and a debt officer working for me. The 5 of us have over 110 years of experience that is relevant to what we are doing here at the municipality in a variety of places, both in the corporate and public sector. On page 4, we talked a little bit about our core services. Our core services is management of debt and management of the investment portfolio of the municipality. A third one is, along with the debt, is managing all the capital financing needs of the municipality outside of the annual budget, operating and grant receipts. So that capital financing need is supported by public finance. Whenever somebody wants to borrow, our group takes care of it. The debt portfolio of the municipality, just as of today, or at least 12/31, is over $2 billion. And it's a variety of debt, including the utilities, the water utility, the wastewater utility, MLMP, the port. General obligation bonds is the lion's share of it. And we also have general obligation bonds authorized by the Assembly, but not yet issued, of nearly $200 million, another 10% of that $2 billion. We also manage an investment portfolio, which has a seasonal swing in balance from about $600 million in May to about $1 billion, almost $1 billion each August. Normally, and of course you can imagine that's basically from our property taxes, which we receive in June and August, and those of course are spent down over the course of a year, so we usually run into a low point right around May of each year. And we have a history of, we've reviewed our spending patterns, and the municipality has a very smooth history of their expenditures. It's sort of uncanny how it works out from year to year and how we spend each month. Public finance is basically an internal services organization or profit and cost center. We don't tax. Our budget doesn't go directly into the tax calculation, but but what we do is we invoice for our services. And although we manage to a balanced budget each year, we do carry forward any fund balance that we have in case we run into a year where there's a material amount of a lack of debt service or debt issuance that we have that we charge for. If that became a material spike down, we might not make our budget, but then we'd use our fund balance. But over the last many years, it's been extremely close, within several $1,000s. So it's pretty working out very well. It shows that we have our pricing appropriate and that we're forecasting fairly well as well. On page 5, we talk a little bit about our debt portfolio. Again, it's $2 billion as of March 31st. The general obligation of the municipality has a general obligation rating from Standard & Poor's of AAA and AA+ from Fitch. AAA, of course, is the highest rating that you can achieve from any of the rating agencies, and we just use Standard & Poor's and Fitch. Revenue debt of the municipality is a separate category of debt, oftentimes referred to as a credit. For example, the water utility and the wastewater utility each have their own credit, and therefore they each have their own rating. ML&P has its own rating, and the port has its own rating, and we manage all of that within public finance. In 2005, we replaced our financial advisor because our previous one was going out of the financial advisory business, so it was natural to do an RFP, and we brought in First Southwest Company, which is now a subsidiary of Hilltop Securities. And together, at that time in 2005, we went through everything that we did with regard to debt issuance and debt management, and made the appropriate changes. We continue to do that on a regular basis ever since then, and making sure that we're following best practices with our debt management. Since then, we've implemented a number of short-term borrowing programs, commercial paper, direct loan programs, direct loan agreements with commercial banks. We've got a master lease agreement with, we had it with 2 banks, we've gone to 1 at the moment. And we've kept in touch with local banks.
Could you speak in the phone a little louder, please?
Oh, sure, my apologies. Again, we've implemented several short-term borrowing programs, such as commercial paper, direct loan agreements with commercial banks, master lease agreements with commercial banks, and we've also kept in touch with the local banks here, including First National, to see if they want to participate in lending us money. And so these kind of programs have primarily served temporary borrowing needs of the municipality's capital programs. So when you're borrowing short, you're usually paying a very low interest rate, and then at some point in time, when a project is done or we've reached a critical max of a critical point of short-term debt outstanding, we refund it into general obligation debt or revenue debt that matches the useful life of the assets that we've financed. Page 6 talks about investment management. Again, in the past 10 years, there's been a couple of years where our balance at August 31st was in excess of $1 billion. The general cash pool is the sum of the municipality's general government and all of our enterprise funds, as well as school district funds. Within the general cash pool, we have a municipal cash pool, which is where the lion's share of our money is invested. The MCP has 3 external managers, each with a respective portfolio that is managed to a different duration or time frame within which they'll hold the money. We put this in place back in 2007, and along with it, we use a outside independent investment consultant, and right now that's Paul Erlinson of Callan and Associates. Callan is a investment consulting firm that has done a great deal of, and still does a great deal of business in the state of Alaska with a variety of local governments as well as the state of Alaska. We also consult once in a while with the Investment Advisory Commission. That's the commission that oversees the MOA Trust Fund, which is where the proceeds from the sale of Anchorage Telephone Utility went back in, I think it was late 1990s, perhaps 1997. And as I mentioned, in June of 2000, we started the municipal cash pool with an outside investment consultant called R.B. Coons. They came in, gave us some recommendations. We looked at all of our investment practices and wanted to make sure that we were practicing best practice in the investment industry for local government. And then we created the municipal cash pool, and we also do a run each month that shows what our actual results are and we actually keep track of where we had been if we'd been using the prior strategy that we changed to go into the municipal cash pool. And we believe, or our calculation shows us that actually as of January 31st, 2017, I see I have a typo there under the last bullet there. That should have been December 31st, 2016. But I just saw the reports for January, and as of January, because of the municipal cash pool, we have enhanced earnings over $75 million. So it's a best practice. It continues to be a best practice, and we're very proud of the fact that we made those changes and are getting the enhanced return that we have. On page 7, investment management is guided by Anchorage Municipal Code, and there are basically 4 investment objectives in priority order. It's the safety of principal, liquidity, return on investment, and duration and risk portfolio. Duration and risk portfolio basically come in with each of the 3 external money managers that help us manage the municipal cash pool. This is a result of back in 2007, we updated the investment policies and procedures as well as Anchorage Municipal Code, and because of that revision, we diversified our investment structure and our portfolio and our criteria under which we invest. And we also bear with me, I had an interruption there. In 2008, that was the worst year of investing for investors since the Great Depression, and we were able to earn a 0.69 positive return. Most portfolios that local and state governments had did not have a positive return. You really only earned a positive return in 2008 if you were invested 100% in treasuries. And like I said, we had a very diversified portfolio at the time, and we were able to earn a 0.69 positive return. So we're obviously very proud of that, and that was a noteworthy item. So that's a quick overview of the various things that we do in public finance, and I open it up to questions that you might have, and Robert and I can certainly address those.
Thank you, sir. Fred, any questions?
I don't want to be the only one here asking.
Okay, Suzanne, any questions?
Yes, but I'm still
Processing? Fred?
Yeah. 2 things. 3. The PERS, TERS debt, is that included in the $2 billion debt? Or, yeah.
It is not. That's really a liability at this point on our balance sheet, but it is not included in the debt portfolio as we track it in public finance.
Yeah, and so that's an unfunded liability that we probably can't deduct. What's the magnitude of that?
Robert, do you have Robert, you may have a better handle on the magnitude of that.
I don't. I think it's. I don't. Let me find that answer for you.
What's the? Give me a back of the envelope. $2, $2 billion.
Oh, I think it's probably between 500 million and $1 billion. But again, let me just.
No, I just wanted to get that. All right.
But I think actually on our 16 statements, we actually, because of GASB 68, we included that in our capital. So I should be able to go grab a page and find that out for you. Yeah. We started to account for that. It has a non-cash impact on our balance sheet this time. So we had to start showing it as a result of GASB 68. So the numbers are readily available, and I apologize, I don't
No, that's fine. So I'm really confused or ignorant about the mix of the state's and the community's liability on PERS and TERS. Can you help me out?
through the chair, I'll give it a good shot, and then I can bring in people who would be able to
No.
answer that directly. So, the state has an obligation to fund, I believe, up to 23% of that liability for us. We have to pick up a small additional piece on top of that. So with that, the state still bears constitutionally the burden, the principal burden of PERS and TERS for our retired employees. We have a small piece. That was the piece that they did they spent 8 months last year calculating, 7 months last year calculating, finally gave us a number that we were able to include into our capital.
Yeah, say it again, the portion that,
The state has the largest portion of that liability.
and we have the
Can you speak up a
23%.
bit, so,
Yeah, I think they have 22 or 23% of that liability. We have the additional small piece.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I don't understand the math. How does 22% in a small portion add up to 100? Who's got,
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. So the totality, I believe, is about 23%. And of that, the state has 22% of that 23. We have just a very small piece. Again, no, please forgive me. I'll go find that out.
No.
Yeah.
So the employer contribution takes up the 70-some%?
Over time, yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah.
all right. And then the state, in years past, has, put billions of dollars into reducing that unfunded
Right.
liability.
And that came from their portion of their funding liability. So I think there was $6 billion they put in,
Yeah.
like 7-8 years ago.
Yeah.
That helped to reduce their piece down to that 20.
But it doesn't impact us.
Yes, we still have to. We still though should have. Yes, it doesn't impact us.
All right. Yeah, and that's really helpful. The state's investment, like the permanent fund, they are precluded by statute from investing in anything in-state. So they can't be a guarantee or invest in some big construction project or some new industry. Does the city have restrictions against in-state investments?
Ross, maybe I'll let you answer this question.
Mr. Cheney and Robert and Fred, the state's, the Anchorage Municipal Code 650-030. That's on page 7. That is a section of the code that's worth looking at if one were to want to go and look at investments a little more detailed. In that code, it tells what kind of investments that we can invest in with our funds, and primarily, it is fixed income investments with the general cash pool funds. So, it's usually highly rated fixed income investments because we collect our property taxes in June and July for the current year that we're in, and we're basically spending them within a year. So it's a very conservative, highly rated criteria that we use for those funds. Now there are other funds that we have in different pockets, like the MOA Trust Fund. That has a different set of criteria. So there's different sets of criteria depending upon the pool of money we're talking about. But generally speaking, public finance invests the portfolios that they invest in investment securities.
So you told me more than I wanted to know, but didn't deliberately or specifically said you cannot invest in Alaska project. You couldn't invest in port bonds, for instance.
No, we wouldn't do that because we're the issuer, basically, and we're the issuer of port bonds. The municipality is doing business as a Port of Anchorage, and we would issue the bonds for the Port of Anchorage, and the bonds would be supported by the revenue stream of the port's revenue, and so it's called a revenue bond. So I don't know that we're precluded from it. So officer, but we historically have not done that. Normally when the issuer buys bonds or invests bonds, it's usually to take them out and retire them.
Yeah, I got that. All right, well, if you could easily let me know what are the restrictions on investing, and I appreciate that you wouldn't do it, but obviously there's always would be pressure from somebody's pet project that needed a lot of financing to get the city to finance it by buying the bonds.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Space, I think what Russ was sort of trying to allude to there is, I'm going back to the investment criteria that are spelled out in 650-030. When we make investments, the requirements we have to follow are first safety of principle. So whether it's in Alaska or in the United States, as long as we have assurances that when we put our money into an investment, it's going to be safe, essentially.
Well, I can read that.
Yes.
I got it.
So that is, we don't have, I don't believe, a geographic prohibition against investing in Alaska. But if somebody wants to come to us and say, hey, we'd love for you to invest in a gas line project, we're going to go back to this and we're going to say, well, tell us about this gas line project. How safe is our money? Can we get it out?
I got it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, thank you for your presentation, sir. We're going to move on to
Okay.
Treasury.
Thank you, Mr. Trainee.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Moore, sir.
Mr. Trainee, I'm going
Ma'am?
to stop the recording so that we have a break if anybody wants to listen to the different portions of the recording afterwards. Okay, you are back on the record.
Okay, thank you. How you doing, Dan? Thanks. Current advice, maybe we need to go around the room and identify ourselves and separate recording. Suzanne?
Suzanne LaFrance.
Dyson.
Big training?
Tim Steele. Dan Moore with Treasury.
Oh, you're Steve.
Dean Gates, Assembly Council.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Moore,
Okay, thank you.
you want to turn the lights on, or you you got a visual on this?
It's just from the paper. Yeah.
Okay, should we turn the lights on?
Okay.
If you need to help, sure. That's fine.
If we got slides, that's one thing, but. Pretty old. Barbara, it's the other switch. And shut that one off, because that's
Got it.
the camera lights.
Yeah, we're going to burn it out. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Mr. Moore. Okay, so thank you. So my name is Dan Moore, I'm the city treasurer, and I've been with the city for a little over 24 years. About 17 of those have been in treasury as the city treasurer. What I was going to focus on today, just to give you some overview, is generally what treasury covers. We have about 27 staff in our division. We are a division within the finance department. And so on this handout that I gave you, talks about our general purpose, and very simply, it's to maximize realization of the city's primary revenue sources. So we're very, very much focused on trying to do everything we can to support city revenues that then support the services that are provided. It's about 85% of all the revenues are directly generated one way or another through Treasury. And so we are sort of a centralized source of generating revenue. We also do a lot to audit revenue to make sure that the city is getting what it should receive from self-reported businesses. And we analyze revenues, which is a very important duty that we do that actually probably about, I don't know, maybe 8-9 years ago, the city would just internally report the status of revenues, but then the municipal assembly changed the code and required that we report on a monthly basis to the assembly as to the revenue status. So you'll see, we're in a sort of a quiet period right now because we're waiting for more actual data to accumulate for 2017. But starting in May or June, you're going to see on the Assembly a monthly report coming from us that will show the status of all the city's revenues. And it'll show you what the budget is for each line item, for each department, for each fund. And then it'll show you what has been accumulated so far in terms of collections for the year. And it'll also show you a projection for where we think we're going to end the year. And over time, our ability to project and to sort of stay on top of the revenues has improved significantly, and we've actually been quite close to the projection for a number of years. So I think hopefully you'll find that helpful. And I know we work closely with OMB, so if there is a revenue issue that comes up during the course of the year, and if it's a negative revenue variance, OMB is able to start adjusting expenses to sort of offset some of that revenue shortfall. And so it's really important to keep on top of the revenues to kind of know how the budget's going to end up for the year. In terms of the types of services that we provide, this is the second section of bullets. We bill and collect various types of taxes. Obviously, the biggest one would be property taxes. That's about 60% of the total revenue pie. We also collect what we call program taxes, which is a collection of taxes that are the next biggest group. And that would include room tax, rental vehicle tax, tobacco tax. We also have marijuana tax that is new, and also E911 surcharge. So those amount to about $55 or $60 million. So they are definitely a large group. There's some miscellaneous revenues that come through, and those are much smaller. In addition, the third bullet, as I said before, we do auditing. Not only do we audit revenues, but we also audit the cash receipts. So we want to make sure that departments all around the city, when they collect money at their facilities, that the money is accounted for, that it actually is tracked on a cash receipt form, and that it actually hits the bank, and that there's no discrepancies. So we, and also that they're coded correctly, so we don't have a lot of misclassification of our revenues. So that's another function that we do. Fourth is we also are we have a section, we have a lot of subgroups within Treasury. One of the subgroups is they run high-speed machines to process. It's about 600,000 or 700,000 payments a year, most of those coming from the utilities. The other chunk would be from property taxes. So that's scanning the remittance advices and the checks and encoding them and getting them ready to deposit to the bank. And they're able to process every day pretty much whatever comes in the mail, even during peak periods. So they're very, very efficient. Fourth is we collect delinquent collections. So not everyone pays their bills, and ultimately Treasury is responsible for attempting to collect on items that have not been paid. For what we can do, and we do have limited staff, we do what we can do, and then we ship it off to an external collection agency. And right now we have one. It's actually based in Austin, Texas, and they are. We've used them for a number of years, and generally speaking, they're doing quite well. There is one piece of the receivable that lately has not been going so well, so we're actually going to look to do an RFP to maybe split off the two pieces of business. Next bullet is we do have a what I call miscellaneous receivable. So for any type of service, let's say it's you rent a room at the library and you don't pay for it up front, you say, well, please bill me. Well, then we will be a centralized area that will send out the bill and also collect the money. And that's on behalf of various departments. So a lot of what Treasury does is a centralized set of functions on behalf of the city. Just a couple more points here. We enforce the code. A lot of what we do is driven by code. There's major chapters. Tobacco tax might be 30 pages long. Room tax has its own chapter. Rental vehicle has its own chapter. So there's lots of chapters of the code which talk about not only the authorization of the tax itself, but the administration and the enforcement of the tax. And that's what we go on. If one of our actions spurs a sort of a dispute in some way or disagreement by the business of the individual, there are processes where they can appeal that. And then we have to defend our position from what we originally decided. Last two bullets, we do with our auditing and our cash receipt work and also setting standards for the collection of cash, we try to focus on internal controls and any loss from either purposeful, sort of embezzlement, which doesn't happen often, or from just not accurate or tight enough record keeping. So we try to monitor that closely. We also provide citywide training to promote those standards. In terms of our accomplishment goals, we're always looking to increase our effectiveness with collections. And so that's something that we routinely look to, and we've actually had really great success over the years doing that, but there's always more room for improvement. We also promote the use of e-commerce type transactions. So we do a lot through the web. We have many thousands of transactions every year that are processed either by an electronic check or by a credit card. For credit card, for the most cases, if it's a mandated fine or fee or tax, we have the fee be paid by the customer. Okay. If it were more discretionary, like a swimming pool fee, and you want to encourage activity, then the departments would agree to absorb those fees. But for us, because of our nature, I think almost all the opportunities we have to pay by credit card, the customer has to absorb the fee. We are working on a project that Chairman Traney recommended recently, which is to actually be able to have people pay with credit card at the counter. And we're located on the 3rd floor of City Hall. So that's something that we hope to have in place within the next month. And our only concern there is just that it might hold up the line a little bit, because sometimes the line can get long during peak seasons of paying property tax. But we'll monitor that and see if it's successful. But so far, we're on track to have that ready. And that is it. So that's our summary. The only other one I'll focus on here would be, this is the top page of performance measures. So there's about 9 of them that we submit to OMB each quarter, and it tracks how we're doing with our revenues and working with the customers and the public, and timely billing, all those types of things. The very first one, though, I think really gives you a big picture of what we do. So these are revenues that are directly collected by Treasury. And of course, we have the advantage of building out property tax, and that's by far the biggest one. But when you compare the amount of revenue that's generated to the amount of cost that is incurred, it's quite dramatic. So for property taxes in total for 2016, $533 million of property taxes. That's both real property tax and personal property tax. Our cost to collect that, and this is property tax collected for both general government and the school district. Okay, it's almost 50-50 right now. I think it's about 52% general government, 48% school district. But of that $533 million, it costs us $840,000 on Treasury side to collect that money, to bill and collect. And that's a staff of about, I think it's 5 or 6 people, something like that. So it's a really small group. If you do that as a ratio, that's 631 times what it costs. Okay. The next category is program tax revenues. These are rental car, hotel, tobacco, 9/11. Those, we bring in $62 million total, $830,000 to collect. That's a little bit more labor intensive because there's a lot of audit work that goes on. And staff is about, I think, 8 or 9. The factor there is we collect 75 times more than it costs. Delinquent criminal fines and fees. This is a wide range of fines and fees, pretty much from the police department, so we collect on their behalf. This includes traffic citations. There's about 23,000 of those in the last few years that are issued each year. Also criminal fines, that's another big one, and that's something actually we're focused on right now to try to squeeze more money out. We have a special campaign going on for that. So $3.5 million is what we collected in 2016. That is after the PFD got cut in half. It used to be closer to $5 million. And these are monies that go directly to the police department. So we collected, but the revenues go to the police department. Of that $3.5 million, $600,000 to collect. And the commission that we pay our external agency is paid by the debtor. It used to be paid by us, but we shifted that cost to the debtor. So in that case, those criminal fines and fees that are delinquent, we bring in 6 times more revenue than the cost. The last one is the MOA Trust Fund. And Ross Risvold, who was on the phone just a minute ago, he talked about all the different investments that he's responsible for, mostly the cash flow investments, which are the normal operating cash the city uses. There's also another fund that was established when the city sold the Anchorage telephone utility, and that was the sale occurred back in 1998. The actual proceeds came to us in 1999, And that's actually right when I started in Treasury. And so that fund currently in 2016 pays about 5.5 million in terms of the cost. And this is not so much internal labor costs. This is the cost to pay money managers and external providers. But $820,000 is the cost in 2016. So that the MOE Trust paid out a dividend that was 7 times greater than the cost. The dividend for this year in 2017 will be closer to $6 million. The Assembly approved a change to the payout formula just last year. So we used to pay out at a 4% rate, now it would be 4.25%. And we checked with our investment consultant, and that was considered prudent. We do use an endowment style model, so what you've heard on the state level about trying to pay out as a percentage of the value, we've done that. We've done that since 2003, and it's been very, very successful, very smooth, predictable revenue stream. So in total, it's a little over $600 million that is directly associated with Treasury operations. And other than that, I can tell you for the trust fund, in case you're curious, the MOE Trust Fund, as of yesterday, the value was just a hair over $150 million. The year-to-date return was 4.9%, and overall, it's been a pretty good year. So it's slipped the last few weeks, but the last couple of days have been coming back. So it's very widely diversified. It is invested in domestic stocks, international stocks, and real estate, in a wide variety of things. We also have a 9-member citizen-based commission. It's called the Investment Advisory Commission. And they are very, very highly knowledgeable, skilled people that give advice about running the trust fund. And so they're there on a quarterly basis to hear from the consultant, to hear from the finance department, and to give their opinion about how they think things are structured and how they're performing. So they also provide an annual report to the Assembly, and that report, along with the Treasurer's report, which comes from me, those 2 reports will go to the Assembly probably in early June. And so that's not too far around the corner. And then you can see how the fund did overall for 2016 and kind of any changes that are in the works. So that's my overview, and any questions you have.
Questions? Fred?
Thanks for doing this.
Okay, sure.
I realize it's a right pain to make people pretty valuable. Have you, in your auditing pay wars, have you detected any fraud that led to indictments?
We actually, that's a good question. We don't usually get into so far as a criminal charge. We have definitely had sort of a bad seed, bad apple type individuals and businesses over the years, and we've tried everything we can to go after them. Usually we require a bond up front, so we are able to seize the bond, but sometimes the bond runs out and then we're really struggling. So, but I would say the one example I can think of in the last couple of years is there was a significant criminal ring going on here in Anchorage where tobacco retailers were buying their tobacco at local distributors, claiming they were going to be sold outside the municipality, but never going outside the municipality, and then distributing them through this ring. We actually we in Treasury, one of our staff people, and total credit to that person who's now moved on, she lives in Texas, but she started seeing some strange numbers and started going, this doesn't seem right. And from that, it just blossomed into this huge federal investigation that it ended up convicting, 6-7 people, jail time, $2 million restitution, federal court, Judge Gleason, so yes.
So I heard you implying that generally your first effort is to recover the funds, and so on and so forth, and you have some kind of internal guidelines that say, this is deliberate, this is criminal activity, and roll it over to law enforcement?
We have some wording in the code that gives us the ability to go that route, to say that there was purposeful structuring to evade the tax, and there's certain clauses in there that will give us the opportunity to go that way. Dean Gates actually was.
Okay, the answer to my question is yes.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right, now, do you, in your audits, audit city functions to see if anybody in different departments has got their hand in the till?
No, we don't. An internal audit, which is its own department, that is what they do. And what we do in Treasury is, if we see departments, because we do review their work daily, if we see departments where there seems to be a pattern of sloppiness or just, a little bit, then we ask internal audit to do audits,
Yeah.
and then they do it.
So the answer to that question was no, but,
We don't do it.
yes, all right.
We direct.
Yeah, but, and thank you,
Okay.
Internal audit, Fred, works for the assembly.
as they should.
And they'll be talking to you one of these sites. If not, I'll make arrangements for them too.
Thank
Mike
you, sir.
Chadwick runs that, very effective. Can you,
To answer your question, the school district did go after some folks that
Yeah, I know.
were skimming stuff off cash.
In my district.
Well, of course. Okay. Wasn't in West Bank, well, actually, West County has some good.
We have a lot of entrepreneurs, management districts.
Sure, I mean, people have cheap grades.
any questions for Treasury?
Yes.
Yes, Suzanne.
I think you mentioned that delinquent criminal civil fines and fees were down from maybe 5 million due to.
In total, yeah. Historically, last few years, they've been running about 5 million per year. With the dividend being cut almost in half, that was it was a $1.8 million loss to the city of Lebanon. So.
Which we can expect to.
And we've now budgeted at that lower level.
That's right.
So, yeah.
Any other questions? If not, thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Appreciate it. On our schedule, next person should be the mayor here to speak to us.
Right, and we've got about, it's about 15 minutes before the mayor will be here, so we
Let's
can
take a
take a
break
little
then.
break. There's coffee in the little room back here, if anybody wants coffee.
By Fred, wait, we're getting a coffee pot in there for you, Fred.
Wow.
Another lady, young man, hard.
I've already sent a request to the staff to buy
She's
new
good.
coffee pots. We'll have tea too, if anybody wants it.
Is there rain in there?
Did you know what? There is not, and I'm not sure why they didn't provide that.
I talked to Barbara, she said,
Put it in.
This is,
just like that.
Revenue share. That's the thing.
Other areas.
most places can't really choose it.
Welfare, there's not
But it's everywhere that isn't organized or city. Yes, I believe it is, yes. And our state troopers will have a mission almost like Canadian Armies.
Yeah.
You know, every word we put.
What are you gonna do in your house?
City, of course, you'll be shocked at many areas decide not to be organized unless they have to.
So there's behind the house there's some two behind those two lots.
People want all the benefits.
Right.
Stay away from my house.
Right. Still within the but yet.
Yep, yep.
Yeah, it goes to, yeah.
And the same thing, there are roads that are state, hardly that over city.
Right. Right.
They're all messy, but
That's
most
an
of
interesting
them-
question. It looks like it's landlocked, but.
And the railroad. There's the railroad's better. Some of the local government builds the road costs down.
Yeah.
Now they want the railroad to pay for some bridge up here. Build a bridge for them. The railroad's like, whoa,
Yeah.
you guys are the ones, you do.
The,
But the state owns the
your
railroad.
house is at
Right.
and
It's a
subsidy.
difficult position, you're gonna have to, whatever you build or how you do it, keep the lights from North Branch out of your house, you know, you can come in there, stop at that stop sign. Shine right through.
Okay,
Well,
the total cost may not change, but the ways may change. And so, looking at the state, so that, so a lot of these are not required.
Right.
You know, and so they were the big money to make the counterpart, that those resources, the oil, go on to all these things. And the state is the only one that gets it. Well, but that's not the point. So should only state government get oil revenue, or should? Sure, so that was the municipal revenue sharing capacity.
Right.
Ended up, well, when I got it, so foundation wall was too
It's like
last year.
to hammer out the boundaries. Well, I mean, it's in the education language. It isn't.
But it does, because of the basic student allowance.
Okay.
That's the formula by which the reimbursement goes to the political subdivision. And, but that's within the purview of the state. That's that.
Well, right, so the language is totally under education.
Yep. And that's not important for those decisions. So,
That's a section sewer.
Right,
you know,
right.
so the state has to basically give this.
I have to really like it.
No, but it can migrate to a certain extent, it's basically.
So here's what I'm and then the Tuesday after that is May 7th.
Must be a whole different thing and all that.
Oh, yeah, it increases.
Yeah, I'm gonna, my kids are pushing me to do some outside work.
Yeah, and I always want to read the full, what's the principles should guide us. Fundamental principles, then just that. And I don't want to be just influenced by, oh, they're gonna make us money. If it's the right thing to do, that's a secondary.
Some rain, melt the snow.
Yeah. And I hate these little waves. The other side, we don't, I don't think we see it because it makes us look good or feel good. Whatever that is.
Yes, you know, it came out when I really had much more money into it.
Yes. So there's a so it's more like
And I would encourage you to ask the question. Is this the purview specifically of government?
But I
I want
like
you to find the laws that people pass. Make it so if you're going to have stay together and kids grow up being cherished.
yeah, it's a transit.
Good luck with that.
Well, that's not my MO.
Pardon?
That's not my MO. Okay, I got you.
So that one is, okay, so the rest of these, that one,
These aren't work sessions, these are more.
Yeah.
Right.
okay.
The,
Yeah, I got it.
what I wanted was I wanted to be as natural as I could, and so I put that light transmit there to get the light in, but I also had to operable windows and seating windows. So the seating
And then
lines in the winter
another
time.
favor,
Yes.
so I think you guys.
You want, yeah, you want,
I would
yes,
like
you want.
one
Yes,
better.
yes, yes. Yes,
No.
totally, I meant to do that. Thank you for giving it to me during the thing, because that would help us do it so fast.
I can see you were like, you need it.
And it has radiant heat floors. And so
Yeah,
the
sure.
exterior's kind of this slab.
And apparently
So
they
really,
put it in here.
system. And then I've got glass blocks in the deck in the back that provide light to the basement. And they're structurally sound.
Right.
And so you can walk out and so it provides extra light downstairs.
Oh, that's nice. Because you have a full basement.
Yeah, and that's where I think the part of the basement. That's kind of nice space. So I've got a whole unit there, and then I've got a little studio around the side. My daughter's having nerve problems, very much, and so she moved to that. But it's actually, could be divided up into precincts.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. They have a garage too, which I guess this is all. Wow.
basically a 3-car garage.
That's nice. I don't like that.
But it's all linear, and it's all for a lifetime.
You guys on break? Yeah, the mayor's supposed to be here in about 10 minutes, I think, right? 5 minutes.
We're waiting for your boss, yeah.
Yeah.
Hi.
Hey, speak now. What's he doing?
He's just doing a welcome.
Okay.
He's
And
got-
then is it almost time for budget?
Anyway.
Yes,
so
but
it's
it's 101 and 11, so the
Okay.
mayor
Yes, I
has
love
10
the fact
minutes.
that
Go ahead.
both
10 till. Great.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that makes it garage.
Yeah.
It's a work in progress. Like kids are surprised.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think my mom's house has it's really too small.
It's a whole link, but over on your side, over there, to 24 steps.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Barbara, are you putting the administration folks up at the table here?
Did you
And then
know
all the-
we're,
All the politicians.
Robert is sitting over there.
Okay.
It is a little bit different. Because Fred and Suzanne is back here. So there is room right here for 2 people, if that's enough for the administration.
Great, thanks.
I was going to come and see you, get an idea on
It's like a monthly work session on
We do.
That
We got a good bid?
that is correct. Seacoast is the name. They are assembly.
From Joe DeSantis, I bet.
Well, and
Yeah, no, he's a homeowners association rep and Southport Community Council.
more than the point.
It's been consolidated.
So that anything we do in this contract will solve or
He
find
does his
solution.
handout.
Uh,
Thursday morning.
Yes, well,
He has about 45.
it does not build what was a Joe recommends. Or, well, it builds 99% of what he recommends. It does not build
Even if there's people across the street.
100% of what he recommends. There has been an active conversation about how much future development to anticipate. And that's been going on between Joe and the mental health trust down the land and the high school and they've accommodated, I think with the mental health trust the conversation now is about whether we do left-hand turn from Yosemite out to Veterans Parkway. And money's not the issue necessarily, but there are design challenges that go with that. So we have heard the arguments and agreed with some and disagreed with others. The project, as we bid it, currently hasn't changed since we started opining on that. So
be glad to walk you through the different choices on that. So Joe will be, I think generally thrilled that the project is finally happening, which is his number one. But actually, I really satisfied with the final design strategy because he had hoped for, like I said, the double turn lane and other smaller pieces, I think. And for a variety of reasons, we didn't feel they were appropriate. And, these are reasonable people in this arena. So, and one of they were not crazy about the intersection. It would have meant realigning the signal. It would have meant it would have made. I broke that. I think they just broke the table.
Yeah, do you want to just, if you want to leave it down, that's fine. We'll
It's cheap table, sorry.
That is why there's a sign on the door.
Yeah, we don't have minimum bracket.
Are you guys okay?
I have to watch myself.
That's exactly why they ask people not to move the furniture, because it's not.
It's press version, so.
It's a useful thing to get into Yosemite. Exactly. It is a very busy turn lane at 7:15, and we get I remember, I think you sat out there and watched you and Jim Lanson. I remember that.
Yeah,
I think
so
there might be one out in
has
the
that
front.
been done on the train, just on this double turn?
The counting? Yes. And there is a short period of time, this case it's afternoon, where the queuing does extend beyond the ideal, but it is very brief. And the challenge is that it creates pedestrian challenges, it makes for a longer crosswalk, and it interferes with the state's intersection. So, as you know, we do all of these.
This one Lansing's or is this the one they set up? Lansing's coming down on my head and just. Okay.
But, so there is a challenge, right? That left-hand turn in that situation.
Yeah, they're painting.
You bet. Good to see you.
I got it.
So I knew your dad.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, we'll have it. Yeah.
So I'm gonna put
It was
a sign
working,
there,
when you were
do not
here,
sit
the
there,
first
right?
time around, and before that,
Do not pull that chair
yeah,
up.
you remember the one time.
Please turn that. The longest,
So
standing,
the next
longest.
little round is the.
Well, they just charge me
No,
$5.
they're longer.
I go in there to do it because I need their guidance and use their computer. So I go in and do all the entries there. The reports to.
Yes, they moved to San Diego, which is where
State Harbor.
I was ready
So that people, so I couldn't do it. And so I went in the next day.
Well, it was Air Force.
In the morning, first thing.
He was in Vietnam.
And they charged me $500.
So we were in San Diego when they left, and that's where we stayed. I'll see him shortly, and I'll make sure he knows. I already told him you won. He thought that was great. So he thought you were nuts for doing it.
That's
He was glad that you won.
That's just.
So was Ron Roddy. Remember Ron?
I do. I haven't seen Ron in a while. Have you seen him lately?
Nobody called me
I'll be darned.
Great that
from
somebody
somewhere down in America.
will sit there.
Yeah,
Or lay
he
down.
spends most of his time in the desert, now, whether it's Palm Springs
Right,
or Arizona or
exactly.
someplace.
Yeah.
Um,
Sometime we have
I'm
time.
gonna go find that.
Yeah, we got one.
I'd like that. I'd like that. I'd like to remind Ron of them at some point too.
I did. Yeah, he got some corners for me. My foster kids.
Making this one and then.
I'm glad. You should make sure we get a chance to remind Ron of that. He does come up every now and then, I understand. So
Yeah, yeah. Probably hook up.
we should track him down.
Yeah, your dad was a delight.
I had Julie. Last. But I can't. I can't.
That's not good.
It does smell good. It's
Sorry.
better than mine.
It's better than you.
No, it's okay.
Hey, Dick,
Yeah.
when administration tries to mess with our schedule,
Mayor.
you have my permission to tell them we're not gonna do things like that stupid trip to the museum yesterday.
And that's fine. You notice I didn't go with you.
Yeah.
Still do.
There's a reason why I didn't go.
What an inappropriate waste of time.
It wasn't administration's fault, it was ours. We should
Yeah, I'm
have
gonna
known,
leave
Scott said we should have known better.
Well,
It was
and
not the administration's fault, Fred.
really,
It's ours.
well, that's manful of you to say it, but
So-
I mean, it ended up being a dog and pony show, and most of it was on the construction detail.
I know.
Who I might have been slightly interested in, but it was an absolutely inappropriate time.
Well, we learned we don't do that. Sorry.
Right. Respectful suggestion, sir.
Good
Fred,
suggestion,
I'm
Fred.
glad you're here with your experience and your questions. Your questions are interesting. And so I appreciate your questions.
Thank you.
But we're waiting for the mayor, who should be here shortly.
What's he gonna tell us about?
Oh, but how dire things are because of the state finances, but how, there's always, tomorrow's always coming. So,
Mike Abbott, tell us what's happening in our district.
I know nothing. Mike Abbott?
Your volunteers, I heard that.
I'm gonna get a different one. This one, I can try and open it.
Shake it.
Get used to it.
Well,
It's our new management style.
Let it sit for a while. Or release it.
Yeah.
Then it'll bubble. There's no sense.
hello, Mayor, how are you?
Pretty good, Mr. Chair. How are you?
Fine, sir.
Good
Schedule's
afternoon.
yours.
You're on the record, Mr. Chair, you can call
Thank
this
you.
one to order.
Call this meeting to order. If we go around and identify ourselves so we can delineate the tapes, please.
Suzanne LaFrance.
Red Dyson.
Dick Training.
Tim Steele.
Good, we're in business. Mr. Mayor, we've got time reserved for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, friends, assembly members. I just wanted to come by and offer my greetings to you new folks and to you returnees. And to let you know that if we can do anything to help your jobs, we're here to do that. If you've got ideas about what we can do for the city together, move forward together, happy to do that. I want to also make sure that you have my cell phone number, my mayor's cell phone number, Fred, not my personal one here, 830-0042, because we'll be transacting official business on it. And to see if you had any questions that we could help with. I think this is going to be an exciting time. The way I look at it, you've been around, Fred's been around me in Juneau. I describe it as a liberating period for us, is because we're untethered from the state. And so we have to forge a new way of doing business. And if we approach it with a measure of creativity and the idea that we can be self-sufficient, we'll be good.
Well, that's those words of saying more taxes, right?
You are so cynical. There are different ways of skinning cats. Yeah, and I'm sure you have a few up your sleeve. I noticed you wear long sleeves. I'm sure you do.
Suzanne, yes, ma'am.
Yes, I was wondering, do you have any specific ideas for how to work out some of those opportunities for liberation with the state? I know we talked about like roads a little bit.
So, I mean, in your area right now, the biggest problem is what are we going to do to provide law enforcement? I'm trying to get armed. And
we're still in negotiations with the state because I think if we allow them to retreat completely from what had been their responsibility without managing a transition, that can be problematic. But we also need to not just think about how we're fixing the problem next month and the next couple of months, but what a long-term solution looks like. And so that's important. What we're also looking at inside the Anchorage Bowl in this last winter was problematic because DOT just basically plowing inside the city is an incredibly low priority for them. And so we're looking at ways we can maybe at least do the dispatching for the plow outs, or if there's a way for the municipality to plow cities or state streets and get compensated for it, we're happy to experiment in those directions. So those are some big initiatives. We got to, we're working with the school district in terms of how we do shared services in a lot of different ways. Probably the most prominent would be with our medical costs, and if there's a real opportunity to reduce medical costs, we can set an example. Perhaps we can do something in conjunction with the state, which would serve them well and further reduce our costs. But anything where there's been a siloing of state function or an Anchorage function and ASD function, if we can find things that are more permeable and ways for us to do things more efficiently with less adherence to, say, the institutional way of doing things, the better.
Yes, Fred.
Yeah, looks like the budget and the revisions you put before is actually balances, and I appreciate that. Also, I think the guy I'm replacing may be the brightest guy that's ever served on the assembly. A lot of integrity and so on. And he says that you've been delightful to work with.
Oh, thank you. Well, I was hoping to go flying with him today, but our schedules didn't quite work out. As for him being the brightest member of the assembly, I'm sure that there are a number of people who would take exception to that, but that's a good argument to have.
Yeah.
Among the brightest.
Pardon?
Among the brightest.
Yeah.
He's definitely among the brightest we've had from even what you got here.
Yeah.
And of course, the way to cut down the snow removal time is to hire our contractor that we use in the Eagle River Road Service area. Yeah.
Well, we're actually working on a way for the snow just to land on the trails. And if we could do that, not on the roads, it'd be perfect.
We'd love to see the state use the Subversa contractor on state roads as well, and in Suzanne's area, for the state to use some of the Lursa contractors instead of, because you've got a lot of what the state calls priority 4 roads, which means they don't even plan to touch them for 2 days after the snow stops. And that's, Upper O'Malley, that's Clark's Road. There's a lot of roads, and Upper Eagle River Valley Road, some of the Loop. So those are excellent ideas. We'd love to see the state, and it's one of the things we're going to be talking to them about over the next month or two.
Yeah, and Anna McKinnon had been working on that stuff. I understood that the ball was in DOT's court on the reimbursement, and they actually end up saving money. And and we get the job quicker. And
I haven't heard that, but I wouldn't be surprised.
So okay. And Lucan's a pretty good friend, and if it would be useful, I'd be glad to join you in those discussions.
Well, if you can use your charm and wiles to help us navigate through the state.
I did the intimidation. Well, let Suzanne do the charm.
Any other questions from the assembly members? Jim?
Any other state-provided services that we're likely to be getting short shrift on?
So the thing that really sticks in my craw is that the RCA have jammed us up on getting a dividend from MLP. In that order of magnitude, the last dividend we got was about $7 or $8 million. I think that we would probably be in line for a larger dividend. I think we should be in line to get some kind of dividend.
What's their logic?
They think that our debt equity ratio is out of kilter. They calculate our debt equity ratio, I think, incompletely, and then they hold us to a different standard than they hold other utilities to. So I'm not really thrilled with how they're viewing ML&P.
You think we take them to court?
I think that opportunity has passed us by. We're in the process of appealing their decision. We're also doing things to maybe address some of their concerns. But one of the consequences of the way the RCA regulates our utilities is that because they regulate ML&P, they also regulate AWU, and for a series of complex reasons, we've been deprived of an AWU dividend for several years.
Now, what does that mean? AWU or whatever the word is.
AWU, the water people.
I don't speak an acronym well.
You'll learn.
AWU, I would understand. No, I don't want to learn. It's up to you guys if you're trying to communicate to make it clear to your audience.
Fair enough.
We're just trying to AWU you.
But that's still a big issue that has to be dealt with.
I mean, that's we're talking about off of those two utilities. It's $10 to $15 million.
School district is another huge issue in terms of what they're doing to city funding for the
Well,
schools.
the bond debt reimbursement issue, to me, is hugely problematic for philosophical reasons. But I also think that the state has a constitutional mandate for education.
And public safety.
And public, yes.
But we, the city, cannot let those schools fail. It's going to be a nightmare.
Right.
All indicators of the fruition.
This is Ann.
And on the topic of schools, if the BSA at the state level is reduced, then
our form we can give them is reduced too. It's tied into it.
Right.
But it depends on how they do it. And Rose is going to talk to us about that at some point in time. Because I had Rose look into that. It's about $5.4 million, Rose, approximately.
Municipality contribution, the 5% reduction that's been discussed, actually happens statutorily within the BSA. It's about $5.9 million from the muni and about $22 million from the state that ASD will use.
And if they just underfund it, then we can still, I think, give them the money. But if they cut it back, the BSA cut it back, then that takes away how much money we can give them. Here's the problem: we've already collected the money in taxation. Then we got to figure out what we do with the money out there, and that will be endless meetings. Believe me, we've gone through this before. But Rose will give us a breakdown on it, because if we got money we can't even give the school district. Why? You know, it makes no sense. It's just hurting our kids. So, yes, Fred.
Yeah. The money the state contributes to K-12 is not just the BSA. And our K-12, I don't know, averages 18,000, 19,000 a year for students, one of the highest in the nation. Part of it's understanding the cost of living, all those things, and rural education, and so on. But if you add in the bond debt reimbursement and the contributions that the state has made to TERS, it almost doubles. The per student cost gets up nearly 40,000. If you add in those other IDE incorrects. That's a separate subject, Mr. Mayor. It's my opinion that you and we are going to decide that there are some things that the city has been doing and can't do anymore. And I think there's a small list of some of those that could be done by volunteers. Do you have anybody in your administration that's kind of looking at that or thinking about it?
Well, we think about these things all the time, and if you've got specific ideas about what we should look at, depending on where you think we ought to be looking, we go to those departments, and we're going to talk to Lance or Wilbur from OMP or Mike Abbott in all likelihood. But it all depends on
which departments are implicated.
Yeah, okay, so, all right.
But also, I mean, Fred, I also want to make sure that we're not steering the department and steering the conversation to just what we can cut, but what we should be doing differently, and what we should be doing better. Because sometimes we get, all institutions, it's not just the governmental institutions, get locked into doing things the way they've always done them, and they might not be responsive to current conditions. And we've got to be responsive, not just current conditions, but we've got to be a little bit predictive about where things are going to go.
You talking about private?
Have I talked about it?
Are you?
No, I'm just speaking in general terms about.
Okay.
I'm not averse to doing that in areas, but I also think that, you know, we ought to look at ways for the municipality to perhaps be able to compete. We do some things as well or better than the private sector.
Yep.
We do dispatch services phenomenally well.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Here, can you get the city members to a list of roads, streets, the state does snow plowing and the city does? Because they're going to get calls from people saying, why wasn't this road plowed? It would be better if we could tell them, hey, call the state on that road, the state road.
So
they don't have a list.
What I've taught my children is that basically any road that's not plowed is a state road.
I know, I've used the same rationale.
I have too.
Sometimes the kids don't believe that.
There's a series of great maps on the Muni street maintenance website, which will show you graphically which ones are owned by the state, which ones are owned by the Muni, and then a separate map that will show you which ones are plowed by each of the entities. So I encourage you to use that and use that to share with your constituencies to help them understand who does what.
Because at the operational level, relationships have been pretty good, and they do some swapping and have historically done a lot of swapping.
You're getting calls, for example, on Tudor Road. Why isn't the state plowing the sidewalk? It's a state road. We plow the sidewalks really well in Lake Otis because that's a city road. And the state doesn't seem, people don't seem to understand. Why don't you just take it and put it down the state walkway?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. So have they updated the website so it's, because it changed last fall, they didn't do some of the streets that they traditionally have done, right?
It has changed, and the maps that are on the website now should reflect the current allocation. Now, that does not affect summer maintenance. In the summer, the state does its roads, and we do our roads purely. But for snow removal, we do swap maintenance responsibilities, as the mayor described, in the interest of efficiency.
And I will say that during the summer street maintenance, those guys are amazingly competitive about filling potholes. So
We've got a lot of them out there still.
and they will get on them as quick as they possibly can, and they'll fill pretty much everything within 24 or 48 hours.
The one on Spinard Road down right at the Chester Creek is opening up again.
Call it in. Call it in.
And you know what? There's an app for that too.
Okay, Tim and then Fred.
Yeah, I did have a question on snow dumps. Are we okay with snow dumps at the moment?
So
No.
I know we were talking about the airport issue and having to transport.
Fred, I'm
on.
going to direct this to Fred, who's good friends with Commissioner Lucan.
All right.
Right. So there is one state snow dump that we make use of, which is the one right by the airport, which is right by our street maintenance shop. We also have another 8 or 9?
We operate 8 other sites.
And we've always shared those with the state. This last year, we've gotten a little bit of a kerfuffle. The airport wanted to charge us $250,000 to use something, and I said, no, we're not paying you. And the arrangement is that you get to use ours, and we get to use yours, and the public is better served for it. And we were eventually able to, for a while, most of the winter, we weren't able to use that dump, but towards the end of the winter, through some persuasion from the governor's office, we were allowed to use that snow dump. But the discussions about that dump are coming up again during the summer, and we need to fix that. And we need a long-term fix for it. There's got to be something that's fair and reflects the realities. And if it winds up being the airport views it as a way to wring money out of the municipality, we're going to be all jammed up all over again.
That's exactly what they're doing in terms of they want freedom to do more, and they want something over on the coastal near the parks over there for a future runway, and so they're using that as leverage to.
And I tend to view
it's just a nightmare.
Look, everything we can bundle all kinds of things together, but these are snow dump issues. And
I shamed him at committee council meetings by bringing that issue up when they complained about snow plowing. I said, well, hey, they've got to travel further, and if the airport were going to allow us to do snow,
it costs us more. And you want an efficiency? It costs us more money to haul snow farther distances.
Final question, Fred, then we've got to move into last over on Budget 101.
Yeah, so, I helped a couple of, one of the passions you and I share is the homeless stuff. I helped a couple of quasi-homeless guys get a shovel and make good money shoveling snow this winter. And it's a logical thing, we got people, some of whom want to work, putting them to work. There's liability issues and so on and so forth. I personally cleared some snow that were blocking the view at intersections, at traffic control signs. And there's another thing that could be done by volunteers, but I'm quite sure there's liability issues, and so on and so forth. But it just makes sense. You and I think that work is therapeutic and really helps people. If we could.
Well, we're both in politics, so I'm not so sure we're living it.
I'm not going to compete with you for this partner. Eat my lunch. Please. Easily. But the same way with sidewalks and everything else. We got an untapped workforce out there. And so some jurisdictions have made that work.
So we did a pilot program last year where we set a van around, basically stopped and got people who were hanging out in street corners and tried to get a couple of those folks to work. And that was a pretty successful program. There were some issues security related around it, but in terms of the impact it had on the individuals we contacted, it was significant. It was based on something we read about that was occurring in Albuquerque. Good Republican mayor in Albuquerque, by the way. So but we're not partisan now, Fred. Okay, and we want if we can expand notions like that, where we are able to put people on a path to productivity, that would be something we're interested in doing. Rounding up the funds to be able to compensate people for their work is a little bit of an issue.
Yeah, and it's going to require some supervision, some transportation, and some shovels, but shoveling sidewalks and driveways for invalids, all kinds of things.
Yep.
Is that any question? Ms. Parsons, over with. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for being here.
Thank you very much, and it's been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to working with you, and if anybody wants to go out and get a cup of coffee or something stronger sometime, we can do that.
Thank you.